Hello and welcome to That's Not Spit, It's Condensation. I'm Ryan Beach, and today I am excited to be joined by Johanna Yarbrough. Johanna is currently the horn professor at Louisiana State University. This past year was, I believe, your first full year. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. And so before that, Johanna was second horn with the Detroit Symphony. And so I'm just excited because it's like on all levels doing things at an incredibly high level. And I think there will be a lot to, learn and to glean. And so I'm just excited to dig into her career and things that she believes, because clearly, like I said, there's just success all around. So before we get started, Johanna, I just want to thank you for giving me some of your time and, all the things that we did before this podcast to get it rolling. I appreciate all of your time and your efforts.
Yeah, well, I'm just really flattered to be here and excited to chat with you for a little while.
For sure. I think what would be best is that we would sort of just walk through your sort of educational history. You can go as far back as you want, but just to kind of get a sense of where you started, how you progressed, and how you got to where you're at, so we can get some context for your career.
Yeah, for sure. I started playing the horn in sixth grade public school band. My band director at the time was kind of fitting us for instruments, and it said something about the horn being left-handed and it being the hardest instrument. And while initially I had wanted to play percussion because I had a crush on one of the boys that was in the top band in the middle school, he talked some sense into me and was like, you know what? I think maybe the horn would be a good fit for you. I am left-handed, so I thought that would be like some sort of advantage. You know, it's not. Spoiler alert. But yeah, I liked the idea of a challenge too. My brother was a tuba player in band, a year older than me, so any chance to show him up was also something that I was deeply interested in.
Of course.
So I started taking lessons pretty young with the horn professor at FSU, Michelle Stapleton. I think I was in like seventh grade even when I met her. And she saw a lot of potential in me. And I studied with her like all through middle school and high school. So she was amazing in that there was never an instance of her wanting to like keep me to herself. So she like wouldn't even let me apply to Florida State. So my parents were a little bit conservative with how much they wanted to invest, I guess, into a music career. It was very foreign to them. They're like city workers. My mom was an urban planner and my dad was a manager for streets and drainage. So kind of like where blue collar meets white collar type things. And my parents allowed me to apply at Curtis because, they were like, well, as long as you don't go into massive amounts of debt for this music career, you can do that. I like totally blew that audition, so it's fine. I didn't go to Curtis. But I did audition at two other schools for my undergrad, and one was Alabama, and funny enough, one was LSU. So I ended up really, no shade to LSU or anything, obviously. But I ended up just really connecting with the teacher at Alabama. So I went to Bama for my undergrad, and there was a little part of me that was kind of restless while I was there. I didn't feel like there was enough competition around. And as, we established early on, competition was kind of my jam.
Yeah.
When I was young. And so for my junior year, I talked to my professor and I was like, look, I don't know what the future holds for me, but I'm feeling like I want to kind of see what else is out there. And I'd like to either transfer or study abroad. And my teacher took that conversation better than I think I ever could. And um, he was like, well, let's look into studying abroad. So I looked into different study abroad programs. There wasn't anything that was particularly interesting to me. Um, so I ended up reaching out to a teacher named Frøydis Ree Wekre in Oslo, Norway. And she said, yeah, I'd love to have you come study with me. You have to audition for the school like anybody else does. And so, to my parents' credit, they were supportive of this idea, even though they were a little bit nervous. So I flew to Norway my first time to Europe by myself and auditioned, and I got on the wait list. And I was like, no. And then 2 weeks before school started, someone in the studio, in Frøydis' studio, had got a job, and there was a spot for me.
Oh, cool.
And through my teacher's help, Skip Sneed from Bama, we made it happen. And so I got to spend my junior year abroad in Norway. And it was one of those kind of moments where it's like before my life, or before Norway, there was like my life. And then after Norway, there was my life. And it changed me for sure.
Wow.
In a lot of great ways. And then after that, I finished my senior year at Bama, graduated, and then went to Colburn for 2 years, where I had Dave Crable for my teacher for a while. And then Andrew Bain had just won the LA Phil position. So I started going across the street and taking lessons with him. And my last semester at Colburn, he started teaching full time. So yeah. And then I won the Detroit job right out of Colburn while I was in my last year there. And then I started with the Detroit Symphony when I was like 22, 23.
Whoa, the dream.
Yeah, at the time it certainly was.
Yeah, of course, of course. Wow, that's amazing. And then you spent, I think, like 12 seasons, right, in Detroit? Is that right?
Yeah, and in fact, I'm still technically an employee there, and
I see.
I'm like right now I'm actually up here playing for the rest of their summer season, and then come, I believe, September 1st, my tenure with the orchestra will conclude, and
I see.
that will be the end of my 13th season.
So you took a 1 year, or you asked for a 1 year leave of absence, I assume, to sort of feel out, is this what you wanted to do, or just for the safety of being able to go back if you really hated it or something?
Yeah, exactly. And to the DSO's credit, they don't really give people leaves of absence. But I think they saw that, this is orchestra adjacent, but it's not like I'm just leaving Detroit for a different orchestra.
Yeah.
So they were really supportive, actually, and they gave me 8 months of leave. So
Okay.
I had to either resign before that, or I was able to play this summer, which with the teacher's schedule worked out kind of perfectly.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot that I could ask about, but I feel like right out of the gate, the thing I want to unpack with you a little bit is competition, because I know that competition is one of the best ways to hone your skills, because there's just other people who are also going after it and trying, you know what I mean? Like it's very much like a skill sharpener, but it can also be incredibly unhealthy. It's a very competitive, it can be very competitive. Like you are saying, if I'm not as good as this person, then I feel bad about myself. And it could be very easy to get into those headspaces where you're figuring out your worth compared to other people, right? So I'm curious, like, how has that continued throughout your life? How has your mindset changed toward competition? Do you not really think about it that way anymore, or have you found healthy ways to do it, or were you always thinking about it in healthy ways? I'd just be curious for your take on talking about the concept of and the actual realities of competition.
Yeah. So something that's been really important to me since kind of, I don't know, I guess starting my job in Detroit is um, mental health, and how like it's so intertwined with how we relate to our musical selves. And I think for a lot of my youth, I was really blind to that. I just kind of I married the musician in me with who I was without any problem at all. Um, well, I guess I should amend that and say there were tons of problems with it. But it
Yeah,
was
sure.
easy. It was
Yeah.
easy for me to do. And so I I became really competitive with the horn because I was good at it. I don't necessarily think that I'm a competitive person when it comes to things that I suck at, which is like I joke around and say is like literally everything else except playing the horn. Like I'm lucky if I get like a 30 when I go bowling, for example. Um, and the funny thing is I don't really care when I do terribly at bowling. I don't necessarily like want to do it again, but I don't care. It's not a big deal. So, can I say that I'm a competitive person? I don't know. But when it comes to horn playing, yeah, I was good at it from a really young age, and it built up a sense of self in me that um, made me have a lot of confidence in myself from an early age that wasn't actually rooted in a, a real image of me, Joanna, who I am without a horn in my hand.
Yeah.
And so because that sort of went um, unregulated for so long, I became really invested in my success as a horn player. Because, like I said, I felt like it was the only thing that made me who I was. And that has taken a lot of therapy to undo. But,
Yeah, no, I
um,
understand.
right. So, like, and you said the word compare. And I think that's what competition is like directly either comparing yourself to someone else or some other person comparing you to others. And it's it's a natural part of what we do. I mean, like to win an audition, you have to be compared to everyone else who shows up. And well, this like semi new development of being compared to the ideal that people have of who should be showing up. Um, but it made me a great horn player, and it made me sort of a not real human being. Is that a
Mm.
good answer?
I completely understand the answer for sure.
Right.
I feel like it's very easy for us people, musicians who spend a lot of time in practice rooms by ourselves, obsessing over these things, putting ourselves, as much of ourselves as we're capable at any given stage of our maturity, right? How much of ourselves we can put into it. And it's like, this is us. I'm going to show you who I am. And then when it's somebody else wins a competition or you lose an audition, it can feel like they're saying we are, as people, are not good enough. Not, I don't prefer your playing or I prefer somebody else's playing, but we as people aren't good enough because it gets so intertwined. I totally agree with you. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, but so like basically balancing that then with competition can really sharpen your skills. How do we, like, what would be a healthy mindset to be able to engage with competition to get the benefits from putting yourself out there and really trying to sharpen your skills as much as possible, but being able to keep it within like its proper context within your whole person? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. And one of my teachers, Dave Grable, has this idea that he would talk about all the time: creative, not caring. And I think that applies to more than just playing our instrument. Um, but figuring out a way to sort of like detach this huge, significant meaning that we've put on our musical skills. so that we can sort of see it objectively. And honestly, I think that has made me a better horn player, to be able to look at the horn as its own separate thing that is just a skill that I'm working on. And like the musician in me is always kind of there, but the engineer that like plays this ridiculous tube, um that's something that like I think it is okay to be a little bit competitive when it comes to like the technical side of horn playing. And if that's what fuels you, it certainly fueled me, and that was great. But I guess I've taken more care to protect the part of me that's really expressing something through playing the instrument. So I guess it's like it's a double-edged sword. And if these two sides of playing an instrument are too connected, then you can join me in therapy, and you can join me with my anxiety disorder, which like that's kind of the other side of it. That's the consequence of not being able to be objective about our playing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more work than I would have assumed to sort of work out all those issues in my head of like, who am I separate from the trumpet? Like I just, for me, it happened when I didn't get tenure in Indianapolis, and I just started being like, who am I? Like, I remember thinking the first question I thought when I found out was like, who am I if I'm not playing principal trumpet in like a big orchestra? Like that was like who I saw myself as. And so, over the next couple of months, it was like all this turmoil of like trying to work out. And finally I came out the other side realizing like I, as a person, have a lot more value to give the world than just how I play the trumpet. Maybe if nothing else, just by the way that I am as a person. And like, that's okay. Like that can be like enough, if that makes sense. But I just think it's effort, I guess. Like when you're talking about being in therapy and like working through, it's like effort to think about these things. It's not just some sort of like snap decision and everything is better. Because when you're sorry to ramble for a second, but when you're so used to fueling yourself one way, and maybe that way isn't the healthiest way, when you start trying to figure out healthier ways, like it can be confusing, because it's like, well, if I don't do this by trying to be better than everybody else so I can say I'm the best, like how do I motivate myself to like what even is a healthy version of trying to motivate myself? I would say, and I'll be curious for your answer, but I would say I deserve to figure out how good I can get just for the sake of seeing how good I can get, not compared to anybody else, but just what am I capable of as a player and as a person? I'd be curious for your answer or how you would respond to that. So if the question was, how do you motivate yourself if it's not necessarily in a comparative sense? What motivates you to continue to want to get better in like a healthy way?
Yeah. I think it's do I have the technical ability and skill on my instrument to say what I want to say artistically and musically through the instrument? And if my technique is holding that part of me back, then like it's time to bust out the studies and do a little more shedding and get to work. Um, and I wanted to add one thing to what you were saying. Um, if you've been in therapy, you've definitely like dealt with some of your inner child, woo woo stuff. And I mentioned when I was in sixth grade, this just like kind of came to me while you were talking, but when I was in sixth grade trying to pick the instrument, it was the competition that fueled me to choose it. And in a way, I'm sitting here now as a 36-year-old looking back and wondering, did I just let a sixth grader dictate the direction of my life?
Yeah.
So like, can I grow up a little bit and say, I know. And like, you were really helpful then. You made me what I am today. You helped me a lot, but now it's time for a slightly more grown up, mature way of doing this, which I think plays into the musical side of it more, instead of just playing really well. It's
Yeah.
also having something unique to say and to express.
Yeah. You and I, we don't have time because I am not your guest, but you and I have similar experiences. It sounds like, this kind of could be wrapped into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. So I guess we'll use it to segue into sort of like core teaching concepts. Like, clearly you're going to be a teacher who like tries to look at the whole person. If you care about mental health, that, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're not just, all that matters is the horn. And it's like our whole conversation would dictate that you want them to get better, but also like to be able to maybe begin those conversations about separating yourself from the horn or whatever. Are there any other sort of core concepts as a teacher that, and almost in a way you could think about as, I say this to everybody, like everybody gets this speech, or everybody gets these concepts matter to me, and then we sort of grow individually from there? Or is there anything like that for you as a teacher?
Yeah. Something that I tell every one of my students is that, like, I am not interested in hearing you play the horn well. That's like a given. And kind of the speech that I just gave on how like technique is to facilitate something higher from us. Like, you playing the horn well is just something that like you go to the practice room and you do, and I'll help you here in your lessons to get better, of course. But the ultimate goal is a connection with the audience. And we don't connect with the audience with a like a metal wrapped up thingy mabobber. We connect through like making people feel a certain way, or we try to cram as much emotion or experience or philosophy or whatever it is into our musical expression. And we don't get to control the way that an audience member feels, but it it just matters that they feel anything, that they can walk away from it not saying like, wow, that was really beautiful horn playing. Like, I want them to say that for sure, but what I want them to say even more was like, oh my God, that was so touching. Like, it made me think of my past mom, or, the first time I fell in love, or something like that. Um, I think that is what we're doing. And I think, like, if you want to talk about why I left the DSO, sometimes I think orchestra, especially as a section player, it starts to become a little bit sterile, and it starts to become about playing the instrument really well and not as much about expression. So I think, kind of my experience with that has really influenced my teaching.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we've had very similar experiences. Okay. I don't want to play devil's advocate. I don't want it to come across that way, but I have an interesting sort of, what you just said is, I tell my students, I don't care about how well you play the horn. But when I asked you what motivates you to do it, you said that my technique and my facility will be able to. So obviously it's about music to you, but being able to do it well is something that motivates you to do it. So how do you navigate them not taking that as, it doesn't matter if I don't play well? You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, it's a real grind to become excellent at anything, right? And you have to be willing to jump in with both feet and to go through that. And I think sometimes a lot of players get kind of filtered out because of that. They're not willing to do that just awful amount of work. Um, and that's also something that I tell my students too. It's like, I will give you everything that I have to help you become better. But if you're not going into the practice room and kind of figuring it out yourself and learning how to teach yourself the best, then there's not much that I can say in 1 hour a week that's going to really make the difference. Um, and yeah, like, I will say that there was a decent amount of natural skill for me, but I think that was only enhanced because I was willing to just do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's no arguing that, right? Like, it just is a true statement that there's a lot of hard work. And I like how you said it, it's a grind to become excellent. Like, that's a sort of, not so nice truth about, like you said, anything, not just music. But it's not like, sometimes, I'll work with people and I'll try to share some information and maybe things get better. And it's like, cool. That's like the first step of however many steps over the next 5 to 10 years that you'll need to take to get to the place where you want to go. There are quick fixes for, like, hey, now we understand how to do this thing a little bit better, but there are no quick fixes to becoming excellent. It's just doing those, quote, quick fixes over a long period of time. And then, we also recognize that if you think about it from like a performance standpoint, there are not going to be enough jobs for everybody who wants them, because there's lots of people who want them. And same thing with academia. There's like lots of jobs, but maybe more people who want them. And so some people possibly might put in all of this work and not reach, quote, that goal. They may not reach whatever that goal is. So I'm curious what your answer to the question would be. Why would it be worth it to go through all of the grind to become excellent if you didn't end up in a spot like that? Like, why would it still potentially be worth it to have done that work?
Yeah. Wow, you sound like a incoming freshman's parents right now.
That's
this
funny.
This is a conversation I've had.
That's funny. I thought it was like a deep podcast question, but it's like, no, it's like a parent that's concerned their child is going to waste all of their time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, and like a lot of money too, for a lot of these students. And there has to be something about it that's worthwhile, that's really tangible, especially for people who may not know the industry like you and I do. And I think playing an instrument or getting really good at an instrument has to be one of the harder things that people decide that they want to do, because there isn't like a great amount of reward other than, being able to do it and to say that, like, I made it. You're not getting, recognized by some huge institution in the world that, is a Pulitzer Prize or something like that. I mean, and in a way, like, I struggle with it a little bit, because my goal when I was doing all the work was to become an orchestral musician and to get paid to do it. And now I'm like sort of at this place in my life where it's like, I did it. And I'm still asking, now what? And that's when I have to go back and look at, the answer to the question that you asked, which is, I learned about grit. I learned about perseverance. I learned about problem solving. I learned about discipline. I learned about motivating myself, which I think is the same thing as discipline, really. And I learned about networking. I learned about communicating. I learned about taking feedback and criticism and turning it into something productive. I mean, these are things that can qualify a person for just about any job. And they happen to just be part of the package deal of sitting in a room by yourself with your instrument and trying to get good at it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I more or less taught myself videography by watching YouTube videos, right? I ended up buying a course, but at first, it was during the pandemic, we had time. And but it was the same skills. Like it was, okay, I'm going to create something that's not going to be that good, and then I'm going to look at it, or I'm going to ask somebody else, how can this be better? And then I'm going to go figure out, I'm going to watch some YouTube videos on how to do that thing better. And then I'm going to try to make another thing that's not that good, but it's a little bit better than it was. And I'm going to do that for years. And then eventually I get to a point where I kind of have a little bit, like, still not really, when I look at like behind the scenes of movie sets, it's like, I don't even understand what half of this stuff is, but I can like make a pretty decent YouTube video now. You know what I mean? And it's the same skills that I was applying as a trumpet player. The cool thing is as a trumpet player for a long time, I was not intentionally doing those skills. I just kind of happened to pick them up. But when I started trying to learn something by intentionally using those skills, it happened so much faster than it did when I was doing, when I was intentionally like doing the process right. So I agree with you. I think it'll give you skills that'll benefit you for the rest of your life, whether you're in music or not. And it's interesting to sort of wrap that into what I think is, you can be as honest as you want with this question, but playing in an orchestra when you don't have a job seems like it is the coolest thing in the entire world. And then when you get into an orchestra and I just finished my 11th season, so you just finished. So it's like a similar amount of time. It's like when you start to do the daily thing in an orchestra, like it's not maybe what you thought it was. And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind speaking to things that are difficult about an orchestra job that somebody might not anticipate, or that would maybe make this thing, we'll just leave it there. Like, what's difficult about an orchestra job that somebody might not think about that makes it like actually the real challenging parts about an orchestra job?
Yeah. It's interesting to answer this question from my perspective now, because my answers have changed having a year away from it versus if you had asked me while I was still in it.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I knew I was dealing with when I was in the orchestra, but now I can confirm with 100% certainty that I had never considered, was that you rarely sound the way that you want to, because you are constantly playing on beat up chops, and you're constantly having to do things that maybe your body is like not really wanting to do, is resisting a little bit. I noticed that coming back and playing with the orchestra. I played principal horn on, like some in school concerts or something where the stakes were a little bit lower. And I was like, I was just having the time of my life because my chops were so fresh and it was so fun. And then the next week I had to play like, I don't know, one note above the staff. And it was like, ow. And I had kind of forgot about that. So that's like one of the more physical terms of it. But there are a lot of things that I was not prepared for. There are social dynamics that I
Go ahead, keep talking, but I'm with you.
there are social dynamics that being in school does not really prepare you for. Sitting next to the same people every single day can be a blessing and it can be a curse based on who is sitting next to you.
Yeah.
The idea of it being, I don't know, the musicians a lot of times try to be democratic about like decisions that they make as a unit and things like that. Um, that took a lot of learning for me to understand that a lot of conversations happen behind closed doors that you're not a part of. So
Yeah.
it's democratic to a certain degree. And then like the rigor of just playing a lot of the same music multiple times. I mean, hopefully your listeners know that, a lot of orchestras have 2, 3, 4 concerts on the same program every week. By that last concert, I even if it was a piece that I just loved, I found myself getting completely mentally exhausted, to the point where I was just like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this right now.
Yeah.
But I have to, and I
Yeah.
have to do it at a really high level too. And it became pretty exhausting to do that.
I'm sure. Yeah. I don't think Alabama, the orchestra I play in, and we don't work as much as bigger orchestras. I mean, we'll have some weeks where we, have multiple concerts throughout the week, but I don't think it's as regular as a bigger orchestra who's working more. And to some degree, that's like a blessing. I kind of see it as. I know that like it's when there's lots of empty weeks, it's like not a good sign, generally speaking. But other times where, we get a week where it's a little bit lighter or whatever, it's kind of almost like a recovery week in a sense. And so, yeah, I found like when I first played, I remember people would be like, I was playing, one of my first concerts I played in Indianapolis was American in Paris. And I remember someone saying like, well, how is this going to be interesting like the 100th time? And I was like, I'll just have grown so much and I'll play this and the solos will be, I'll reflect, I had like some answer for it. And then when I had played it like 5 times, I was like, oh my gosh, we have to play this again. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so easy to like romanticize it when you're not in a job. And there are beautiful, amazing things about playing an orchestra job. Like, don't get me wrong. There are just things that are hard that you like could never anticipate. And some of what you described, like the social dynamics, that's just like, did you hit the jackpot and find a group that like has a good vibe, or maybe not? And there's some challenging personalities to navigate. So I don't know. I just was curious for your take on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no like sort of sexy segue here. I was kind of just curious about, one interesting way to get to know somebody is maybe to talk about failures, to see like often failures shape us more than the successes we have. So I'm curious if there are any failures that you could call them failures. Maybe you don't see them as failures, but whatever, just things that have happened in your life that didn't work out the way you wanted it to, but sort of shaped a lot of maybe how you began to see the world. And maybe you even look back and you're semi-thankful for this thing that didn't work out the way you wanted it to because you grew so much for it. Are there any instances of that?
Yeah. Funny enough, that is an incredibly sexy segue because
Thank you. Thank you for saving me.
Something that I do kind of consider a failure, but in a little bit of like a twisted way, maybe, was it does have to do with the social dynamics in an orchestra and in the Detroit Symphony in particular. For a long time, I think I would say that I really did hit the jackpot with a lot of my colleagues. And they became my best friends. And I like now I can say this, but back like now I can, maybe I'll rephrase. Now I can see why what I'm about to say is really like not good, but they were like my family.
Yeah.
And don't get me started on how triggered I am every time I hear someone talk about their colleagues like they're their family. But because of that, I became so close to a lot of my colleagues that I fell really hard into this idea of groupthink, where you kind of, if everyone feels this way, then I should too. And as I've gotten a little bit older and a little bit stronger and a little bit more confident in my own principles, I had a pretty big disagreement with some of my colleagues as far as, to not get too deep into that, but
Yeah,
as
yeah, of
far
course.
as, I think maybe I'll say it on what fair actually is when it comes to auditions, and when it comes to how people should be treated, and particularly how women are treated in a very male dominated brass section. Um, I I was I dealt with a very cynical, bullying, harassing personality in my section for almost the whole time that I was there, all but
Mm.
this last year when I was literally gone. Um, and it dealing with him shaped the way that I saw auditions, and it shaped for me the concept of what I think fair is. And it got to a point for me where being behind a screen and not knowing anything about the person was maybe fair for them, but I didn't feel like it was fair for the people in the orchestra, or fair for the person maybe who sits next to them. If a person has a reputation or they have a history of treating people a certain way, I don't necessarily think that should be ignored. And I did what I felt I needed to do to make that opinion known. And it broke the friend group that I was in. It broke the family that I was a part of. And that is not the failure. What I think the failure is that I spent probably a year trying to convince my friends to see my side. And as we know from the political climate of today, when people have made up their mind about something that's really like close to them, there is no amount of explaining that will change anyone's
Yeah.
mind. And I like wrecked myself trying to get people that I thought were my best friends to understand me. And I wish I could go back to me 3 years ago and say, no, you don't need to, you don't need to explain again.
Yeah.
And even more so, have the same argument in my head for the, I swear, like 100,000th time. Um, just, try to move on from the hurt as best as you can from losing these friends, and try to change the world the way that you want it to be.
Yeah. I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. It's very interesting to me. I mean, I'm sure this is everywhere, but trying to suss out which of these people are my friends and which of these people are my friends because I haven't said something that upset them yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a thing that I never thought I would deal with, but it sounds like we've again had similar experiences. So to take that in like what I would consider to be a very positive light, you've had all these experiences and now you're working with like young people who know a little bit about who they are, but they definitely need mentors and people who are trying to at minimum share ideas with them that are worth thinking about. Whether or not they agree with you or not is, in my opinion, irrelevant. Just that saying like, hey, here are some things to think about that I wasn't thinking about when I was your age that might help you. How do you see yourself in a role like a mentor like role, helping people navigate or at least think about things like what you're describing just now, in addition to I got to help you play the horn better?
Yeah. And that it's what I just talked about was exactly why I decided that I think teaching might be a better fit for me now, because there, I think it's really important that we try to influence the next generation to be better than we were or are. So the mentorship side of teaching is probably the part that I like the most. Of course, I like seeing my students succeed and win auditions and competitions and stuff. But I think what would kind of ultimately define success to me when it comes to teaching is watching a student of mine handle a really hard scenario or situation and come out of it feeling like they did the right thing, like they did the kind and compassionate and empathetic thing. Those are the things that kind of matter to me most about who people are, and not necessarily how well they play, which, has changed a lot over the years. But, kind of, it goes back to that earlier topic that we were talking about where, like, we're not just a horn player or a trumpet player. Like, we are people who play the horn and the trumpet. And based on some of the things that I learned in doing an orchestra job that I did not expect, like the social dynamics, I find that it's so important that we talk about these things. Um, yeah, I can't remember if that was your full
That's
question,
great.
but
Yeah, we read Chop Wood, Carry Water. Do you know that book?
no, I don't.
Yeah, it's funny. I read that book. I worked with a career coach named Karen Kubitas for a while, and we had lots of these conversations. We had a lot of conversations I was not ready for that I feel like I'm now like starting to understand like years later. But one of the first things she had me do was read this book, Chop Wood, Carry Water, and then I read a billion self-help, self-development, personal development books. And then I came back and read that book again, like a year and a half later. So maybe I didn't read a billion books, but I read a lot of them. And then I came back and read Chop Wood, Carry Water. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's like so many of these books are wrapped up in this insanely, like you could read that book in like 2 hours. Chop Wood, Carry Water, and there's so much wrapped in there. And then we read it with our studio, and it was like it led to some really interesting conversations, I think. And like to me, that is, I agree with you, one of the most fun parts about teaching is just like let's just have an interesting conversation. Like I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am here to introduce some ideas that you may not be thinking about, that I've been thinking about, that maybe would be good for you to at least consider. Yeah. And so I enjoy that part of it as well. And I think it's so important. I think we can't just let like the grind of school and like concerts and juries and lessons and all that. I don't think it's necessarily healthy to let that grind like make our students unable to like pause and think about some of these things from time to time. You know what I'm saying? I think school can be this grind that's always happening, and you don't always have time to stop and think, am I doing what I want to be doing right now? Like, are things happening the way I want them to be happening? And just to think about that, because you're always sort of shuttled to the next thing. And so I think any amount of teaching where you can at least try to introduce some of this stuff is good. But at the same time, obviously, people are there to get better at their instruments as well. So I'm kind of curious from that perspective. And obviously, this is going to be very influenced by your time in Detroit and things like, and you talked about music making and things like that, but I'm kind of curious, just like, what are things that you would consider to be non-negotiables in making music? Like there are certain parts of music making that we can all decide, I want to do this a little bit differently than this person. Maybe I'll pick a little bit different tempo, or I won't play as loud. But for you, what are some things that are absolute non-negotiables that everybody, in order for this phrase to be able to spin the way that it's supposed to, these things have to be happening? I'm curious what you would say about that.
Oh, that's a really hard question that I've never thought about before. And I think maybe I'll kind of frame it as like a misconception about music making.
Sure.
To get really technical about it, I have yet to meet a young horn player who, wow, this is so technical, but who plays notes long enough and doesn't add space in between notes. I find that like we when we add space in between notes, we get into this really technical way of playing where we try to make it safe and we try to make it a little bit easier. It's like, oh, if I have an octave jump, like if I add a little bit of space, it gives me just that split second that I need to shift to the next octave. Whereas when I think we're playing truly musically, not to like beat this completely mutilated horse to death, but how would a singer do it? So I think we're getting back to like the most natural form of music making, which would be singing. If we didn't have an instrument, an external instrument, we only could use the one that we're born with, which is our voice. How would we do it then? And a non-negotiable is playing notes really long and connected. As my teacher, Dave Crable, said, which this is a weird one, each note gives birth to the next note. It's kind of
a weird way to say it.
Kind of icky, but I get it, right?
Yeah, I do too. It's a weird way to say it, though.
Yeah.
But sometimes those weird ways like stick, right? I'm sure that's probably why you remember it so well.
Yeah, of course. Finding patterns in the music that we're playing. And the way that I kind of start my students when they're freshmen, they have to play, well, I say that as a first year full-time teaching. I start them with Mozart, which has patterns all over the place. I think classical era music is where we find the most patterns. And once we identify the patterns, what do we do with them? We have to do something a little bit different with them, whether each one gets a little louder or a little softer, or the articulation maybe broadens as we go through the patterns. But identifying patterns is another one. And figuring out, where I'm going with a phrase. That seems to be something a lot of young students have never thought about. And it took me, it was like my sophomore year in college, maybe even after Norway. I took lessons with the euphonium professor at Alabama, who at the time, he was very, very helpful in helping me figure out what a phrase is, which is, he put it just so easy for me to understand. He said, you're crescendoing to a specific point that's based in, music theory and all of that good stuff that my students aren't always thrilled to be talking about. And then decrescendoing away from it. And it like blew my mind because my teacher was always saying phrase through, phrase to that note, whatever. And I just kind of didn't really understand what that meant. So identifying the peak of the phrase, going to it and coming away from it. And then also just being informed on the styles of different eras of music. So, if I'm playing something in the classical era, like when we're doing Mozart, another great opportunity to learn how I'm going to lean into the crunchy note, and then I'm going to resolve away from it. So, I guess I'll kind of stop there in the like technical parts of what is a non-negotiable on music making.
Yeah. And there's no right or wrong answer. You know what I mean? That's why to me, it's like kind of an interesting question. Like I would say like playing in tune, like that's a non-negotiable, stuff like that, like playing correct rhythms, like getting the right style. It's like, we can't talk about, but all of your suggestions, like to me, totally fit into that too, where it's like, there are certain aspects about music making that have to be happening before we ever start talking about making it yours. Mm-hmm. In a way, like you have to do your due diligence to be able to play your instrument in tune, understand correct rhythms, play with consistency, play with style. And then all the stuff you're talking about, understanding where the phrases are based on like the harmony and the structure, not just on like whatever you feel is right or wrong. This is one thing I've changed on. I used to just play based on instinct. And my wife, I would say, well, she'd be like, well, she's a clarinetist, right? And she's like, well, why do you do it? I was like, that's just kind of how I like it. And she's like, I'm not sure that's the best like justification for. And so, I pushed back on that for a while, but then eventually kind of came around to like, yeah, maybe like there's some decisions that I could be making based on like what's there. So I totally agree with you. And I think a lot of students, that's where they should be. Those are the things they should be concerned with for a while. Is like, what are these non-negotiables? How do I get a handle on these things? And then once they're there, it becomes a lot easier to add, I think, your own personal flair.
For sure.
Talking about style, talking about non-negotiables, I'm curious. I don't do any section playing. As you know, I'm principal trumpet with Alabama. So I would love to learn from you what you would consider to be, how do you find success as a section player? Because the idea for me, I remember talking to Ben Wright, he's second trumpet in Boston, and asking him the question, like, how do you do? And he pointed out, well, because I don't play section, that's why I'm not as good at it as I maybe could be. But the idea of filtering my sound concept through somebody else is like so foreign to me that I don't understand how you play confidently while trying to play like somebody else, if that makes sense. And obviously you're getting hired for a job, so hopefully you're not that far away from like where the vibe is already playing like you. But I'm curious, like, how would you answer the question of like, how do you find success? Because I think you do it incredibly well. So I'm curious for your thoughts on successful section playing.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, I guess the first thing that I would say on being a great section player is to not sit there and wish that you were playing principal.
Sure. Okay. Step one.
There are a lot of section players out there who are just kind of biding their time, waiting to be a principal player. And for me, that was never the case. I wanted to be second or fourth my whole career. And something I didn't mention is that I did start as fourth horn in the Detroit Symphony. And I think it was maybe 5 years in or so, I moved to second. Which the other part of it is that you have to be able to set, I mean, I guess this kind of goes with what I just said, but you have to be able to take a little bit of your ego to be the one who's right and kind of put it aside. And where I found that my confidence was really built and maybe my ego was stroked a little bit was how well I could follow and blend and predict what someone was going to do. And so I was very lucky. The principal horn in Detroit for the bulk of my career was Carl Pittuck, who I think is one of the best horn players of my lifetime. And I will even go as far as hot take saying that he's one of the most underrated horn players of all time. Because he's someone who led quietly and by just doing it. He didn't tell people, hey, you need to play that longer, or hey, play that louder, anything like that. I always felt like he trusted me and he valued what I brought to the table as his second horn player. And so that helped me, it helped me kind of figure out that I was a really valuable member of the section and that his success was dependent on me. And maybe that's like giving myself a little too much credit, but I don't think so. Like I feel like section players can ruin a good time
for sure.
for a principal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Like I think I like to think of my ability to be a chameleon when it comes to sound as like one of my greatest assets of playing the horn, which has been a really interesting thing to come to terms with this past year, where I was not just a second horn anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So, it was about it was about almost like if I could jump inside a principal horn player sound and just kind of look around and figure out how it was built, and um, then I almost could imitate anyone. And maybe imitation is the wrong word too. It's more about supporting their sound than it is about imitating it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, and it's like kind of funny, almost like you were talking about where you got your confidence is like doing it well. It's like, oh, I could almost imagine you, based on this conversation, being semi-competitive about it, and like, I'm going to be the best second, like I'm going to be the best second horn player, and I'm going to blend better than anybody and support better than any, but it has like that effect of you almost like leaning into like what the requirements are and saying, I'm going to do those requirements better than anybody. And so you still get the competitive thing. You get the thing that drives you to be the best, but it's not about showing anybody up. It's about being the best supporting, cast, so to speak.
Yeah. And like the only person who really recognized if I was doing a great job or a miserable job was the principal horn. So it's like I got to really show off to one person.
Yeah. That's amazing. I've got like a lightning round here of 15 questions. But before that, I was just going to ask, I'll ask you, I was going to ask if you had anything that you wanted to say that we like didn't cover necessarily. So we could do that and then end with the lightning round, or we could do the lightning round and then end with like whatever your final thoughts, final, whatever maybe. Or if you want, I can formulate it into a question and we can go. What do you think? It's going to be a choose your own adventure today.
Okay. I'm really feeling the lightning round right now. So let's see what happens.
All right, there's 15 questions, and this is, how a lightning round works. It's just like one sentence, one word answers.
Rapid fire.
Here we go. Question 1. What's the first piece you ever performed in public? All right, I'm going to reframe that question. What's the first concert that you remember playing with the DSO?
My trial weeks were Rachmaninoff symphonic dances and Mahler 5.
Hot take: the Rachmaninoff is not a good piece.
Hot take: you're wrong.
Okay.
Except there is saxophone, so I guess there is like a little bit of room.
Yeah, there's just like I don't know. We just played that this past season, and I didn't really know anyway. But it's not my interview, so you're right. All right, favorite excerpt to play in an audition?
I mean, when I was like at the height of auditioning,
sure.
I think Mahler 1 was kind of my jam. I could play it softer than anybody. The like low tutti thing.
And the third movement?
Yeah. You didn't automatically know what I'm talking about. But now I'd say Chassis 5.
Cool. The low one, or I assume the low one from the beginning, not like the high horn. Okay.
Not my literal nightmare. No.
The next question is, what's your least favorite excerpt to play in an audition? Anything above a G in the staff.
Yeah,
that's a joke. I'm sorry.
No, but you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Short call, Wagner short call.
Okay.
I had to do that for my Curtis audition, the one that I, blew.
Yeah.
And I think I missed the opening fifth like 4 times. And then when I auditioned for Tanglewood much later, I also missed the opening fifth 4 times. And so now it's like, if I see that on a list, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Some good mental associations for sure.
It's not my job. That's on the list.
Awesome. Question 4. One word your students would use to describe you.
Oh my God.
Lightning round. First word that comes to your mind.
Well, they know the first word that I like use all the time is grit.
That's fair.
Maybe they'd say I'm intense.
That's good. All right. This will be an interesting question. Dream orchestra to sub with, besides the ones you've already played in.
Oh, Chicago.
Okay. Favorite non-classical artist or band?
Oh my God, there's too many. Currently, Men I Trust.
Okay.
Have you heard of them?
No.
Well, well, I
Maybe
have
I'll
tickets to see them on August 5th.
listen. Maybe I'll listen to him soon.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, hot take, this band's not good. And then you'll say, hot take, you're wrong. I'm just kidding. All right. Question 7. What's always in your case or gig bag besides your horn?
Beta blockers.
I thought you were going to say like valve oil or slide grease. That's funny. Favorite city you've traveled to for music? Probably.
Tokyo.
Okay, when'd you go there?
The Detroit Symphony went on tour. We went all over Japan and China in like 2015.
Cool.
Tokyo's awesome. Yeah.
Number 9, coffee or tea before a performance?
Coffee.
Okay. It's a weird question. I asked ChatGPT to make these. And so I'm just reading whatever it came up with.
But you know what's funny is every time I sub with the Dallas Symphony, which I say every time as if it's been more than twice. It's been twice. I noticed the principal horn drinks tea. So.
Okay. Question 10. Favorite composer to play?
To play, Mahler.
Yeah, that's
obviously.
the right answer for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a weird question. What's your horn player guilty pleasure piece?
Horn player guilty pleasure piece. Would it be a good time to say Rachmaninoff Symphonic?
I guess. It's your interview, like I keep saying. You can say whatever you want. What's one thing you do to calm your nerves before performing? I have a feeling I know what that is.
Yeah.
Is it beta blockers?
Yeah, I mean, actually, beta blockers are.
Yeah, sorry. Let's talk about it for a second because I feel like I feel like sometimes beta blockers can be some weird taboo subject. So I feel like it would be, you want to give your like 60-second like, why are beta blockers fine? How do you use them? What do you think about them? It doesn't have to be 60 seconds, but we don't have to have like a whole discussion. But just curious, what's your take on beta blockers?
Okay. I mean, I've used. I would say that I'm not someone who like takes multiple beta blockers or who takes them for literally everything. But I used beta blockers when I was on the audition circuit for sure. And it really made a difference for me to be able to play the way that I wanted to play, to just kind of get out of my own way. But the way that I use them now, as a professional, is I take them, depending on what the repertoire is, I take them for the first rehearsal of every week. Because I feel like if I can get off to on a good foot, or the right foot, get good start. I don't know. If I can play the first rehearsal really well, confidently, and without a lot of self-doubt, then I'm kind of good to go for the rest of the week. And the worst thing for me is if there's like a super soft, low entrance after, or like to watch a conductor just kind of slowly give you the upbeat and then like release their fingers as to when you come in. That is okay. That like broke my playing for a long time. I had like a hesitation issue that it didn't go away for a long time. Still kind of there. But I've gotten to the point now where if I take a beta blocker, I don't see those first on a page of music. Okay. And I just get to it and it's sort of like, oh, here's this soft entrance. Let's see if this conductor is going to make my life hell or not. And then it is what it is. It's not like, to bring it all the way back to the beginning. Like, I'm a terrible person,
Right.
and I can't even come in soft.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I use them these days.
That's great. No, I think it's important to talk about it. I think beta blockers, from what I understand, my take on it is it will relieve physical symptoms, but if you haven't worked out what's going on in your head, it's not going to do anything to help with that at all. So there's still worth finding, healthy relationships with your instrument and how you see things and all of that, so that because it just won't help with any of that.
Bingo.
Let's see. 13, best advice you've ever received, or a good piece of advice you've received.
When you win a job, don't stop practicing.
Fair. 14, what's one hobby you have outside of music?
What's a hobby? Is reality TV a hobby? I like that. I like to garden.
Okay. One of those, I think, is a traditional hobby. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not reality TV.
No, I do like to garden. It's not as fun in Louisiana as it was in Michigan, to say the least. But yeah, and I have 4 cats and a dog, and I feel like at this point I'm a hobbyist pet owner.
Nice. Last question. If your horn had a name, what would it be?
Oh, ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's the stupidest question. You could just tell us the names of your animals if that would be a better final question.
Let's do that. I'm like looking down at my horns and nothing is coming up.
Let's do the names of your animals.
Okay, names of my animals. So my dog is Bailey.
Okay.
And then my cats are Mia, May, Bruce, and Bo.
Bruce is a good name.
That's in descending order of their age.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There are some like people names that are hilarious when you give them to animals. Like we had a cat named Walter.
I love that.
Yeah. I miss Walter.
My parents have a dog named Peter.
Yeah. It's like there are some names that just like are hilarious to me. Bruce is like in that category for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also feels like a cat name too.
Does he have like a little mustache in his fur?
Well, it's a little bit less charming than that. He is a tuxedo cat, so he's got kind of like the black mask and then the white chin.
Okay.
So his full name is Bruce Wayne. I don't know.
That's fine. That's hilarious.
It's not fine. It's really lame.
Well, I was trying to bring this up. All right. Yeah. So I think to finish, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm really enjoying just hearing kind of like your perspective. This is me personally speaking. Like I'm enjoying hearing your perspective on orchestra stuff because I'm in a similar place. There are things that I really, really enjoyed about my job, but there are things that are infinitely frustrating about my job. And, I'm not going to say misery loves company, but kind of knowing that there's not some other perfect utopia somewhere else. And I'm in the bad place and everybody else is in the good place, so to speak. You know what I mean? But rather there are just challenging things to navigate in all jobs everywhere. Some places might have better cultures than others, like for sure. But like being aware that that's the case, or it could be the case, I think can make all the difference for someone getting a job and like immediately being aware that, hey, maybe there's something I need to like look out for. And I need to have strategies for how I'll navigate difficult situations and things like that. So I appreciate that perspective. And I'm excited for you moving forward as a teacher. I think you're going to obviously be able to have great conversations with students. And so it's just cool to hear all that. I just want to make sure that if there's anything that you felt like you wanted to say or you were thinking about when getting ready for this that you didn't have a chance to say, that you would be able to say it now.
Well, I guess I just want to say, you said you're excited for me and to like see where things go. And I have to say, I'm really excited too. And I haven't felt that way about my career in a really long time. It became very routine and just more or less, like, this is what's expected of me. So this is what I'm going to give to it. And, when the concert's over, I'm going to go home and I'm going to go back to being a human being. And this last year was really challenging in a lot of ways. I lived apart from my partner for the 8 months that I was away, or 9 months rather. And I traveled more than I think I ever care to ever again. But I got to do things for the first time after having been at a pretty high level in this industry that I never got to do. And a lot of some of those things were subbing with other great orchestras and getting to say yes or no based on if I wanted to do it or not. I got to record a concerto with the LSU Wind Ensemble, and I played a stupidly hard concerto that's really high and really taxing, and I did it at a level that I was super proud of. I won some grant money to have music commissioned for me and whomever I wanted it to be commissioned for. So, like, the principal horn of your orchestra, Valerie, and I had a piece written for us, for example, and we got to tour all over the country playing it. And I did solo recitals and got to be a featured artist at a workshop. And I feel a little bit like I'm bragging at this point, but
I get it though. That's like stuff that you couldn't do because you were in the daily grind, that now you're getting all these experiences. And I get it.
And like, on the other side of that too, like, I got to connect with these students who are like great people, and maybe not all of them buy into everything I say and love my teaching style and whatever, but even those students like have taught me so much about myself and about the world and about the industry and where we're heading. And I have a lot of hope. And I won't say I was hopeless before, but a lot of my perspective was based on a very small view of what was around me. And this year I felt like I got to go out and see the world. And I'm really excited about where I'm going and where the industry is going.
That's awesome. I'm so happy for you. I mean,
thanks.
Not just because you said it, but like, I get it. Like, I understand completely what you're saying. And, I'm hoping some of that stuff can be true for me as well in the coming years and things like that. And so you're someone who inspires me in that way to be like, you're a person that's like, this stuff is possible,
Yeah.
So it's very cool for me. I'm assuming someone who listens to this is going to resonate with what you've said and been like, this is so cool. I really want to tell Johanna how I felt about it. If someone feels that way, how would they get a hold of you?
I have two kind of reliable ways, I guess, to get a hold of me. One is if you want to email me at Johanna Yarbrough at lsu.edu, you can do it there. Or if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm jo.yarbrough, YARBRO.horn. And I tend to interact with people a lot there. So, yeah.
So check that out. Johanna, I appreciate your time. This has been a lot of fun for me. Yeah. Hope you've had a good time. If you haven't, you're very good at faking it. I want to, again, so thank you for your time. I want to thank Brandon Yoakum for his work on mastering this episode of the podcast. You can check out Brandon at epiphanyrecordingstudio.com. And most of all, I would like to thank you, the listener, for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next episode.